Hello, our dearest audience, and welcome back to your program Russia English Cafe, and welcome to Almania Podcast. As we saw in the last episode, we have tackled the story of Prophet AYub, peace and mercy be upon him. Today we will have the lessons from story of Prophet AYub. Every person is faced with trials and tribulations at one point or another in their lives. It's patience that helps the believers cope. When the calamity befalls a patient believer, it doesn't crush him. Instead, the believer endures, persists, and has hope in the mercy of Allah and the rewards that are awaiting him on the day of judgment. Patience is a virtue that you can work on to develop. There is much to learn from the story of Prophet AYub, and he's the ideal example of the afflicted believer who remained patient and faithful to his Lord. أهلا وسهلا بحضراتكم في الحلقة الثانية من قصة سيدنا قصة سيدنا أيوب. احنا خدنا قصة سيدنا يوسف وكان فيها دروس مستفادة. النهاردة هنتكلم على قصة سيدنا أيوب والدروس المستفادة من قصة سيدنا أيوب. هنشوف مع بعض. So let's start. First one, when a sickness, for example, a chronic disease or any other form of hardship prolongs, we start becoming more and more frustrated. At the beginning of the trial, we may have turned to Allah. However, when it prevails for some time, our relationship with Allah starts deteriorating. We began to have doubts about Allah and lose interest in worship, thinking negative thought on the lines of why me and why did all do this to me, and this may eventually lead us away from the straight pace. لما حد فينا بيقابل أو بيمرض مرض معضل ومرض طويل ومرض خطير لا يرجى شفاؤه، كلنا بنتجه إلى الله في بداية المرض، بنتجه بالعبادة إلى الله وندعو الله بالشفاء من هذا المرض. ولكن عندما يطول المرض وينتشر بتبدأ علاقتنا بربنا يحصل لها فتور، بنبدأ يكون عندنا شك إن الله مش هيشفينا من المرض ده، وبنفقد الاهتمام بالعبادة وبنفكر تفكير سلبي، ودايما نسأل نفسنا ليه أنا تحديدا، ليه ربنا جاب لي أنا المرض ده. لكن الله سبحانه وتعالى says in the Quran, and as for man, when his Lord tries him and thus is generous to him and favor him, he says, my Lord has honored me. But when he tries him and restricts his profession, he says, my Lord has humiliated me. وكما جاء في القرآن في سورة الفجر الآية 15 و 16.
فأما الإنسان إذا ما ابتلاه ربه فأكرمه ونعمه فيقول ربي أكرمن وأما إذا ما ابتلاه فقدر عليه رزقه فيقول ربي أهانن.
So, you may have experienced that if often becomes more difficult to worship Allah when you are sick, it's not easy to pray when you are in pain. Imagine the sickness and the constant pain that lasts for a few years. Nonetheless, Prophet AYub alayhi salam didn't cease to worship Allah. His relationship with Allah was not dependent on the blessings of Allah. He continued to worship Him in both times of happiness and in distress or catastrophe. So, if you are going through a hard time and it has been a long while, don't lose your sincerity. Keep worshipping Allah and trust Him. He has the best plans for you. سيدنا أيوب لم يتذمر مما حصل له من فقد أبنائه وفقد ثروته وفقد مرضه تحديدا هنا. لم يتذمر ولم يدعو الله بالشفاء. سأل زوجته وقتها لما قالت له اطلب من ربنا يشفيك، قال لها انا ليا كام سنه تعبان، قالت له 7 سنين، قال لها ما جاش اي حاجه في الخير اللي ادهوني ربنا، ما اقدرش اطلب منه ان هو يشفيني، وهو اللي كان معيشني في سنين طويله من الثروه والرخاء والازدهار. فهنا بنقول ان احنا مهما تعرضنا لحاجات ما نفقدش الثقه في ربنا ابدا. Practice perseverance. The most amazing thing about Ayub is his perseverance. Perseverance is the ability to keep moving and remaining persist despite the difficulties and delay in achieving our desired result. Ayub alayhi salam was persistent in remembering Allah and expressing his gratitude to him. سيدنا أيوب لم يتذمر وما طلبش من ربنا ان هو يشفيك، بس كان عنده يقين ثابت ان كل ما يأتي من الله خير، لان رب الخير لا يأتي الا بالخير. So in our obedience to Allah, it's very important that we discipline ourselves and remain steadfast. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commands us in the Quran, "Oh, you who have believed, persevere and endure and remain stationed and fear Allah that you may be successful." Surah Al Imran, verse 200. A practical tip on how to remain steadfast can be obtained from the following hadith. Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, peace and mercy be upon him, said, "Do good deeds properly, sincerely, and moderately, and know that your deeds will not make you enter paradise, and that the most beloved deed to Allah is the most regular and constant, even if it were little." حديث سيدنا محمد عن خير الأعمال. حدثنا عبد العزيز بن عبد الله حدثنا سليمان عن موسى بن عقبة عن أبي سلمة بن عبد الرحمن عن عائشة إن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال: سددوا وقاربوا واعلموا أن لن يدخل أحدكم عمله الجنة، وإن أحب الأعمال أدومها إلى الله وإن قل. Allah Messenger said, "Do good deeds probably, sincerely, and moderately, and know that your deeds will not make you enter paradise, and that the most beloved deed to Allah is the most regular and constant, even if it were little." The next lesson from a Prophet Ayub story: do not lose hope in Allah. Another thing we may face while going through a hardship, and especially a prolonged one, is losing hope in Allah. It's shaitan who makes us despair. Allah mercy. It is stated in the Quran, "Indeed, no one despairs of relief from Allah except the disbelieving people." Surah Yusuf, verse 87. Know that Allah is testing you only because He loved you, and that the real life is the life of the hereafter. Keep making da'wah to Allah and keep making dua to Allah, and be certain of its acceptance. Despite the long years of suffering, Ayub, peace and mercy be upon him, didn't lose hope. He prayed to Allah and He eventually accepted it. And Ayub, when he called to his Lord, indeed, adversity He has touched me, and you are the most merciful of the merciful. So we responded to him and removed what afflicted him of adversity, and we gave him back his family and the like thereof with them as mercy from us and a reminder of the worshipper of Allah. Surah Al-Anbiya, verse 83 and 84. وأيوب إذ نادى ربه إني مسني الضر وأنت أرحم الراحمين. Indeed, adversity has touched me, and you are the most merciful of the merciful. Again, indeed, adversity has touched me, and you are the most merciful of the merciful. إني مسني الضر وأنت أرحم الراحمين. This is the end of our episode for Prophet Ayub, lessons from his story. Stay tuned. شوف حضرتكم على ألف خير الحلقة الجاية. دكتور رشا يوسف.